The Irish and British governments have agreed a new framework for dealing with the legacy of Northern Ireland's troubles. Taoiseach Simon Harris described the new joint framework as an imperfect opportunity to make a real difference to families bereaved by the troubles. It includes commitments to fundamentally reform mechanisms in the controversial 2023 Legacy Act passed by the previous Conservative government, raising expectations that the government here could drop its case against the UK at the European Court of Human Rights.
The governments have been working on this for a year. The challenge was to agree a deal on the past that would stick when so often it has failed. They think they have it, and that will heal the damage done by the hated UK legacy law it's replacing.
This is a complex framework. It will take time to absorb and to interrogate. Trust is something to be earned, but it does lay the ground for a profound transformation.
It is clear that a perfect outcome is not attainable. But we firmly believe that this agreement, underpinned by new commitments from our two governments, represents the right approach.
There'll be a reform and a renaming of Northern Ireland's current legacy body. It will get new powers and more independence. There'll be greater oversight of its work. In the Republic, the government will legislate so state agencies can cooperate with the new Legacy Commission in the north. The Gardaí will set up a legacy unit. Troubles deaths there will be investigated. With around 1,000 unsolved killings during the Troubles, it's little wonder that so many families are still looking for answers or pursuing justice. Legacy really is the unresolved issue of the Northern Ireland peace process. Karen Armstrong's brother was one of 10 Protestant workmen murdered by the IRA in the 1976 Kingsmill massacre. She's sceptical today.
At the end of the day, why don't they just open the files and give us them? You know, there are files and there's information that they have kept from us for so many years. And it's so unfair and it's very hurtful as well. And, you know, you just sort of think, well, can you trust them?
Before they revealed the plan, the two leaders briefed victims groups in Belfast. Several organisations were represented, including one whose spokesman, Paul Gallagher, was badly injured in a loyalist gun attack 30 years ago.
The devil will be in the detail of the legislation over the coming months, and then how that goes through Westminster Parliament and the Dáil and how it's implemented. And I think that's where we will give our sort of final judgment.
Not in the framework document, but in an accompanying news release, are protections for British Army veterans, including from repeated investigations.
There can't be any special arrangements or side deals for veterans. These processes have to be about truth. They have to be about full disclosure.
This has been a complex negotiation, and it will take time to bed in through legislation. In the meantime, the governments have urged Troubles families to give it a chance. Conor Macaulay, RTE News, Belfast.
Well, for more on this, we're joined from Hillsborough by our Northern editor, Vincent Kearney. Vincent, a reset of relations perhaps between the Irish and the UK governments, but will it deliver for families when time really is of the essence now?
Well, Charlotte, that is the big question. Now, the Irish and British governments today insisting they believe this is the best deal possible for those families, stressing that the time is indeed running out. Simon Harris, the Taoiseach today, saying this is a night and day improvement on what has gone before. Northern Secretary Hilary Benn saying that, or making the point that many of the families of victims are getting older. They've been waiting too long, he said, for those answers they've been trying to secure for so many years. So they believe that this is the best deal possible. It's a joint approach, unlike what we've seen in the past 2 or 3 years. So Simon Harris stressing today, it's a long time, he said, since the Irish and British governments stood shoulder to shoulder on legacy. So there is a confidence there. But there is also, I think, a little bit of nervousness too, because many of the families groups have made it clear that they will withhold their final judgment until they actually see the final legislation. And one issue that caused a bit of a blip today that Conor referred to in his report, that was not in this 10-page report. just shortly before the press conference began today, journalists were handed a 3-page press release. That included 6 points, safeguards for former British military veterans who served in Northern Ireland. They included protection from repeated investigations, a so-called right to stay at home, so if the new Legacy Commission wants to speak to former soldiers, they can do so from the comfort of their own home in Britain and not come to Northern Ireland. And also was called protection in old age. So Legacy Commission would be under statutory obligation to consider the health and well-being of witnesses. Now, we're told that will apply to civilian witnesses as well as former British military veterans. Now, British government sources today said the Irish government was aware this was coming. It also says parties in Northern Ireland were made aware that it was coming. And interestingly, it says that while those provisions are not included in this document, they will be included in final British government legislation. Now, we've heard Sinn Féin have already said there can't be any side deals, so they're clearly raising potential concerns about this. And despite these provisions, the DUP has been highly critical. DUP leader Gavin Robinson saying it's absolutely outrageous in his view that the Irish government has been given what he says is a joint role in drawing up British government legislation. So certainly a lot of confidence in Dublin and London tonight that perhaps they have set the way forward to finally crack this legacy puzzle, but there could be some turbulence ahead.
Kearney from Hillsborough, thank you for that. And we will be speaking to Taoiseach Simon Harris later in the programme. Now, as we were hearing earlier in the programme, more than 1,000 families had investigations into the deaths of their loved ones shut down by the Legacy Act. Shortly before coming on air, I spoke to Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Harris from Hillsborough. I began by asking him if the new framework agreement to replace the Legacy Act would lead to more prosecutions related to the Troubles.
Yes, and it will lead to more structures to have human rights compliant legacy processes in place. And can I just say at the outset, Sharon, this is a historic and significant moment. It's been more than 10 years since the British and Irish government stood shoulder to shoulder and tried to address the most painful, difficult issue from the Troubles, and that of legacy, that of conflict, that of loss of life. And when we set about a year ago resetting our relationship with the UK, I think it's provided a real opportunity for partnership for the two governments to come together, step up to the plate and say we have to do better by victims and survivors. And what this new infrastructure today, if faithfully translated into legislation, will mean is that for the first time we have on an all-island basis an ability to tackle the issue of legacy in a sensitive, human rights compliant, comprehensive way. And I think that's a really important step forward for victims, their families and survivors who have waited very, very long for this day. Was there much consultation with victims' families and indeed parties in Northern Ireland, because you really need them on board for this to succeed? So yes, there was. I would have had a number of meetings with victim representatives groups. I think I've met them 2 or 3 times over the last number of months. I know the Secretary of State would have also had the same, and my officials would have had that. And again, this morning, before publishing the deal, we met with a number of victim and survivor groups, including the Victim and Survivor Forum here in Belfast. I also took the opportunity to speak to all the parties leaders, all the party leaders in Northern Ireland yesterday in advance of this, and we'll continue to work with them. But this stage was about making sure that the two governments moved in lockstep to outline what commitments we're making to the people north, south, east and west in terms of trying to resolve very deep, very sensitive, very complex issues in relation to legacy, scars that run really deep, and to try and provide an ability to move this forward so you don't have intergenerational trauma. This has been the hardest piece. The Good Friday Agreement 27 years ago had to park this issue of legacy, and ever since then there's been many, many efforts to move this forward, and I think today is a really good opportunity to get this to a much better place. One of the commitments the Irish government has made is that it will cooperate with UK investigations. What level of cooperation will be expected? Will it involve the sharing of sensitive intelligence? So we've already shown an ability to be able to work with inquiries in relation to Troubles-related incidents. What we want to do here is, for once and for all, put a structure in place that says if the British government establishes a legacy commission that's fully human rights compliant, we would pass legislation in our jurisdiction that says we will cooperate with it as well. Of course, information will be shared in a manner that is appropriate, and all of that detail will be worked out as part of the legislative process. But I want to move beyond this kind of stop-start start having to put an individual mechanism or response in place for each and every case, and actually instead have a proper legislative backdrop that will enable cooperation on a cross-border basis, because so much, as you know, so much of this happened across the island of Ireland, and it's really important for victims that they can get those answers and get them in an expeditious manner.
The press release issued today about this framework agreement, it outlined 6 protections that would be offered to veterans, but that wasn't included in the 10-page agreement framework. Were you aware that that was going to be part of the UK legislation?
So just to be clear, that's not part of the framework agreement. The framework agreement is as published, and any protections that are afforded to veterans will be the exact same ones that must be afforded to anybody else who cooperates with the Commission, and we're very clear in relation to that. So how the British government decides to speak to people in Britain is a matter for them, and I don't wish to involve myself in British politics.
What's your opinion on those protections? Is it a good idea?
The British government is what's published. Well, it depends on what you mean by the word, what anyone means by the word protection. I have no issue with people being able to give evidence remotely if that's viewed appropriately, but that has to be something afforded to anybody engaging with the Commission, not just to any one group.
So it would have to apply to paramilitaries as well as British soldiers?
Yeah, I mean, we have to put mechanisms in place to enable everybody who is required by the Commission to cooperate be able to do that. And of course, in some cases, people may be elderly, people may be infirm, and there may be a case for people being able to give evidence remotely. But that can't be applied to any one group above and beyond any other. And I'm very clear on that, and I said that indeed at the press conference here in Hillsborough today.
Separately, Taoiseach, if I might ask you about another electricity provider announcing today that it's to increase its prices. It's the 4th to do so in the past week. Was the government too quick to say that it wasn't going to include energy credits or one-off payments to people in the budget?
Energy pressures are real and energy bills are rising, and they are causing real pressures for families. I'm very conscious of that. So fuel allowance season begins next week. It will see over 400,000 people receive the fuel allowance, the largest number of people ever. This is a payment of more than €924, I think, during the fuel season. And we will continue to look at what more can be done in relation to affordability around electricity. We have set up a group, an affordability energy task force, which is due to report to Minister Darragh O'Brien very, very shortly, and make recommendations on how we can try and lower the prices and costs that consumers are facing in Ireland, because these are very high. But we do also need to do that against a backdrop of moving away from this idea of nearly 2 budgets each year. That's not a sustainable way to run the country. So we have to try and work out within the normal budgetary framework how we can help working families, how we can help businesses, how we can help older people with the cost of energy. And I know that's real, and indeed with the cost of living. So we'll consider all of these things in the round, but we are moving away, as you know, from one-off measures in advance of Christmas. But there are other ways.
So you're ruling them out. People. Are you still ruling out any one-off payments and energy credits in the budget?
Yeah, the position from government has been clear in relation to moving from one-off payments to more sustainable, permanent ways of reducing people's cost of living. And what I suppose I'm making the point is we have a number of ways of helping people. Fuel allowance will help people in the here and now. That kicks off next Monday to the highest number of people ever, more than 400,000 homes. And we'll consider other measures to help people with the cost of living, but that will be within the normal budgetary structure, which will be announced on the 7th of October.
OK, Taoiseach Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Harris, thank you for speaking to us from Hillsborough.